So welcome to the Viv podcast. Today we've got a great guest I've been looking forward to, Sandy Burgess from the SMTA, known as the Scottish Motor Trade Association. I'm going to pass you over to Matt, who's going to ask some questions. So take it away.
Excellent. Thanks, Danny. Sandy, great to see you. Thanks very much for coming on board with us in our very first podcast. So it was important that us being Edinburgh-based and Scottish company, that we kept the relationship with you and I that we've had for many, many years, along with that, with the SMTA being local as in Scottish as well. So thanks for coming in. Delighted to get you on our first one, as we say.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely delighted to come along, Matt. And as you say, we've got a lot of years, not necessarily a lot of knowledge, but a lot of experience between us. So
It'd be dangerous to combine both then, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it just? Yeah.
So I guess we're looking for this podcast to go probably beyond Scotland and into the UK. So for those of our listeners who are asking the question about the SMTA, can you give us more of an insight into the organisation?
Sure, only too happy to. I mean, the Scottish Motor Trade Association, to give it its full title, was actually formed in 1903 here in Edinburgh. And at that point it was formed with the ethos to encourage, promote and protect its members. Now, 1903 obviously is not yesterday, but the membership base at that time, including manufacturers, because obviously at that point there was lots of small manufacturers of vehicles, adapters, and this new concept of people that were there to repair and sell vehicles, because really it was at the forefront of the industry forming.
Yeah.
So it's had a long history. It has only moved twice in its history. Once when it was in originally Palmerston Place in Edinburgh, and now to our current offices out in South Queensferry, sitting between the bridges. We have this fantastic view of the Firth of Forth. It is stunning, Danny. But the reality is that ethos that was applied all those years ago was actually well picked, because it has stood the test of time. And I know we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. But the way it has managed to stand the test of time is to develop and change relevant to the market. And of course that's exactly the situation that's happened with the dealers. We no longer represent manufacturers, because obviously we all know what's happened to the manufacturing process and is still happening as we speak. But the dealer situation has again changed from being purely blacksmiths who then started fixing vehicles to very highly technically skilled businesses of various sizes. And I'm delighted to say we have representation in every single postcode in Scotland. And that includes all of the islands, obviously. And there's some unique situations in some of the islands that are really quite fascinating when you get down to the detail of it.
I would imagine, and through my past experience, I've touched on quite a few of them. Some characters out there, aren't there?
There are, and I actually was down at DVSA in Bristol about 4 weeks ago, and we had a conversation. I'm not going to tell you which island it is, because everybody will want to go there and take residency, because this particular island does not have a requirement for vehicles to be DVSA MOT tested. Heavy vehicles, of course, and that's because there's no testing facility. If they come onto the mainland, they've got to go and get tested, but they can operate on the island. And it's things like that you don't actually consider that would come into the day job of running a trade association. But it is the way, and it's the only way that you actually understand effectively our customers are our members, they're also our shareholders. So you have to dwell on that thought for a minute, that it's a case of we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. So the only way we can guarantee that we're doing the best we can for everybody is to constantly be speaking to them and communicating to them. So that's the way we try and fundamentally run the business.
So in 1903 you talk about the ethos, and now here we are sitting here today, many years on. Is that ethos continued and carried on right up to today, or do you feel that there's been any changes?
There have been changes, there's no doubt about that. The ethos itself, encourage, promote, protect, categorically, yes, it is exactly those three words, and it's as simple as that. However, as with everything in life, it's a constant changing process. I actually say to people now, the only constant is change itself. So the requirements that our membership would have on us have changed as the industry has changed. And if you just think of that whole timeline from 1903, there might have been, listen, I don't know, but there could have been 100 vehicle manufacturers in Scotland, all making their own wee tiny vehicles and producing 10, 12, and one by one they've all disappeared. We had a situation last year at our at our annual dinner where we had a vehicle called a Skioch that was actually made in Dalbeattie. Now, it's relevant to me because I live in Dumfries and Galloway, but the relevance of it is there was a manufacturer who he developed what was called a bicycle car, and it was exactly 100 years to that time that it was launched in the Scottish Motor Show, which also belongs to the SMTA. Oldest constantly existing motor show in the world, by the way, predates Geneva. Useless fact number 2, the first Scottish motor show was 1897. This country has always been at the forefront of what's happening with our industry. We can claim that, and it is there. But the point about that vehicle was that the chap who designed it and who built it, only built about 12 and then the factory burned down, but it was because it was a low-cost vehicle, because that's what they saw the market needing. You now come here, we are 120 years later, and Citroën have launched their AMI, the wee plastic car, 2-seater, very cheap, almost the same ethos as that chap was building a car 100 years ago for a mass market, and it's even only going to be available in left-hand drive, but they can't handle any more orders for the UK. So it's a case of some things are constant, some things change. Obviously, put the two products together, it's night and day.
Yeah.
But the whole process of how that operates, and the one thing I think about our industry that hasn't changed, and I don't believe will, I might be naive in that, but I firmly believe this has and always will be a people business. So we've got to make sure we manage how our members deal with that concept and ensure that they can deliver to the consumer, who effectively is the marketplace.
That's a great point, Sandy. And we talk about the people business. Do you feel that so much is happening in the industry that we forget about that and take your eye off the ball a little bit, or do you feel there's still quite a focus on that people part of it?
I think we periodically go through situations where we forget about people. Now, at the moment, we can't forget about people because there is a huge skill shortage. Obviously, been brought about all the arguments about Brexit, about the pandemic changing some people's attitudes, all those reasons. Our industry has always been sharp, it's always been dynamic, it's always been quite harsh, and it's never normally the easiest industry to work in from a point of view of work-life balance. Mm-hmm. So we've now got a situation where predominantly COVID brought about some people actually measuring that and redressing that. So effectively there are solutions out there. We now need, as a trade association, to think about how can we can introduce our members who may not be aware of that in the marketplace, because if they can somehow soften the impacts that traditionally go with working in the motor industry, the late hours, the weekend working, I'm talking now about sales operatives, mm-hmm. If we can find a way of helping to soften that, the use of technology and products that are out there and available, by simply introducing them to it, they might be able to retain their staff more, they might be able to reward their staff better, all these things that allow them back to the basics of having people. Because I've always thought that in effect, and it's a throwaway statement, and I understand that it's not meant to sound blasé, but you can by and large replicate most things. I always talk about price, product, premises, process. They can all be replicated. Yeah. The one bit in the middle of all that, the core, is the people, and we just need to find a way of making sure we can retain. Well, A, we need to attract the right people. B, we need to train them properly. C, we need to be able to retain them. And we need to do that in an environment where they're entitled to earn a proper return for their investment. And that applies to the businesses as well. We've got the electric vehicle, the alternative fuels, ADAS, data. These are all things that are on the horizon, and electric vehicles are coming over fast. What I'm trying to suggest to some of our members that are now looking at that is they maybe have to look at that in a different way. They're investing heavily in products, premises, processes, as we've mentioned, people, because you've got to have specific training. Yeah. they should actually take that from the approach that they're entitled to a decent return on that. The race to the bottom, I think, is over. We've got to start getting decent returns, and it'll all filter through into the sector going forward. We shouldn't be embarrassed about expecting a good return for the level of investment and effort, because this is undeniably a hard working industry.
Very much so, very much so. And I guess, we talk about your role a little bit more, and I want to find out more about being the Chief Executive of the SMTA. And I remember the day where it was announced that you were on board then, which, how many years ago was that?
Wow, you're asking me that. It was, 7 years. 7 years. I'm 7 years in post. I suppose there are two things that have almost been constant in my life. And one of them is a certain brand of vehicle, because my father worked for them and then I went and worked for them and all the rest of it. So I grew up with that brand and with the motor industry at my heart. But from the age of 16, I was an SMT apprentice mechanic.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Didn't call them technicians in those days. We hadn't got to those dizzy heights. I was simply a mechanic, and I served a 4-year apprenticeship. Rather embarrassingly so, and I'm about to watch Danny's eyes just glaze over, with an organisation that sold Datsuns. The Datsun was the predecessor name to Nissan. So I sort of took it from there. Obviously, as I then went through the various job roles that you're aware of some of them, Matt, in that I've been a technician, I've been in sales, been in management, all that sort of stuff. I always saw the SMTA as a badge of honour, as something that had to be earned. So when I set up my own business, again, after selling my business to a larger organisation, I then decided I wanted to get back into it. So I set it up, and I purposely joined the SMTA again as a member with a very small used car operation. But I wanted to do more, so I became involved in the board, ultimately became the president, which I was extremely proud of, because I had this SMT apprenticeship card fortunately it was printed, because I think about 2 years before that happened, the printing press was developed. It was that long ago. But here I now had this business card that said president.
Have you still got that apprentice card?
It's somewhere in the house, but it's, I couldn't lay my hands on it, if I'm being honest. But I do have the ability to go down the stairs in the SMT vault and find out where the membership number is, because everybody's recorded. But my point is, when the chief exec role came along, I wanted to have a go at that. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't because I am being dismissive of my predecessor, but I just felt that differences could be made. And I felt I could impact that because I had been in this industry all my life.
Such an affiliation from being young, when you were younger.
I understood lots of the problems that our members had and still have. Yeah. I've been fortunate and I've worked for dealer groups. I have worked in a sort of parallel way for a manufacturer, and obviously I've been responsible for large businesses. In those days it was 1,200 employees. I mean, that's not large nowadays, but pretty sizable businesses and very small businesses where it's been me and somebody looking after the admin. So I genuinely believe I've got a well-rounded approach to the industry. But I've had to change as well, mm-hmm. because I came in with targets, objectives, plans, and we've been very fortunate. We've had a good run at it. That's not because of me. My role is simply to say that's where we want to go. Because that's what I think the industry needs. Speak to lots of industry people and get lots of good feedback. But the delivery is down to the team at Palmerston Place, at Palmerston House. Sorry, they do the work, and we all work very much as a team. I know you're a football man, so you understand that. Yeah. Is it job done? It's never job done. No, it's absolutely never job done. I mentioned earlier, we've got technology is now driving with electric, alternative fuels, hydrogen. Where's that going? ADAS is a huge situation that will provide opportunity to those who wish to embrace that opportunity. I think there's sort of further segmentation of the sector going to happen. We've got on the franchise side, we've got the debates about agency model, and that's looking that that's likely going to be the way forward. And of course, that's slightly complicated because we're no longer part of the EU. So the agency model that comes to the UK will come likely once it's resolved in Europe. And I'm not a betting man, but I would suggest there won't be a huge difference in the two. Not all manufacturers will go agency. Some will go a hybrid version. That also brings extra challenges, opportunities, but it's always very interesting. That's the beauty of it. I tell people this. I'm very fortunate. I get paid to think and speak. You know, that's where my job is.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to let me anywhere near your motor car. That certificate that is XYZ years old. You wouldn't let my wife wouldn't let me near a lawnmower. So it has changed a lot. Yeah.
I think with agency models, you know, that's the sort of in topic at the moment, isn't it? You know, a lot of when you look at the AM Online and other publications, then there's a lot of talk about that just now, and it's just when and who's going to make the first move, isn't it?
Yeah, I think. Well, of course, the reality is it will come about sooner rather than later now because the dates are fast approaching.
I believe so. Yeah.
And it's we're now in that run-out period of the vehicle sales block exemption, and the service block exemption expires next year, or the after-sales block exemption. The appetite that I see from Europe, and this is sitting as a current board member of SECRA, is that there is almost a unilateral appetite for renewal in some form because we need to have some level of protection. It's either that or we end up in a free-for-all that you do with when you go and buy a fridge. You know, that's really not a concept that we can consider.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be an advocate of whether the agency model is right, wrong for our sector. That's our members, that they judge their own businesses on that. I'm quite happy to, as I say, do the speaking. If somebody wants to tell me what their view is, I'll pass that view on, which we're currently doing at the moment. In fact, I've got a meeting in a couple of weeks' time with regards to that, again, to influence some of that thinking in Europe. There is a fellow trade associations doing that relevant to the UK, and the good thing is we're all sort of trying to get the best we can for the sector because there's some very, very heavily invested people in this sector, but we can't forget that the independents need that protection as well. And then we move on to the whole consideration, which is the use and the ownership of data. And that's got very far-reaching scenarios, especially when it comes into security data.
Yeah.
For example, the modern vehicle, my own car sitting outside there, most of us would have sat-nav in our car, and most of us have been quite lazy and put in a sat-nav destination that says home. So no matter where you are in the UK, you go for H, you bang in home or previous destination, so it'll be called home or house or whatever. And if most people like me, I don't use sat-nav to tell me where to go. I use sat-nav to tell me how long it's going to take.
Same. Yeah.
And I then like to ignore it. And I got a very feisty German lady who comes on and tells me that I'm doing the wrong thing and all this. But it's there. But the point there is, if that data is in the car, then the car is subsequently sold. Somebody needs to take a responsibility for cleansing that. Some of the manufacturers are looking at complete ownership of the vehicle, which includes a data cleanse.
It's funny you mentioned that. I used to be a product genius.
Okay.
So my job was to obviously show the dealer, the customer inside and out the car.
Yeah.
But obviously it would go through prep and all that kind of stuff. And obviously when it goes through prep, when you do the handover, you'd expect all of that to be out. Mm-hmm. All the previous customers' data, their home address, their contact logbook, everything. But sometimes I'd go in the car, do the handover, and pops, some random person's address and stuff like that. So I'd have to go through and delete it all. But no, just to make a point on what you're saying.
Yeah.
100%.
And the implications of that, of course, on GDPR.
Yeah.
I talk about ADAS, and I made this point to a group I was with on Monday, I had a situation a couple of weeks ago. I was in a dealership, used car dealership. Chap who runs the business, sitting having a conversation with him, and they had a windscreen chap in going to fit a windscreen, and this particular vehicle was a Renault Kadjar, and he said, right, so that's it. He said, needs a windscreen. We've got the windscreen in stock. Do you want it fitted? And the guy who owns the business said, yeah, of course I want it fitted. It's got a chip in it. I need that done. Okay. He said, I'll just take it away with me if you get a set of trade plates. Well, why do you need trade plates? Just do it there. I said, I can't do it there. He said, because I need to take it back to the base to calibrate the ADAS functions on the windscreen. And he then said, but he said, I could fit the windscreen and we can not calibrate the ADAS and it'll save you 120 quid. And the dealer said to me, what do you think? And I said, well, I'm just getting my head around this, because if that vehicle has got ADAS fit to the standard and you fit the windscreen and you don't have the ADAS recalibrated, you then sell that vehicle under the Consumer Rights Act. If the customer buys that vehicle and there is a fundamental issue with that vehicle, had they known of that at the point of purchase, they can reject that vehicle. So you need to start thinking about it. And then that opens up the whole idea. Who's actually going to protect the dealer? Because he could fit the windscreen, he could disable the ADAS, and three changes down the line, somebody who's maybe wholesaled the vehicle twice could have that vehicle. They won't know anything about it.
That's right.
So we really need to start, because the modern vehicle has got so much attached to it that it's technology based and also data based. So it's a whole new concept, and that's quite exciting. I find it really interesting. But don't ask me to explain any of it. But just being aware of it, and that's one of the things I see my role and the role of the SMTA. One of the core roles is encourage, promote, protect. Protect. We need to make sure to protect that our members understand there are ramifications if you make a decision based on that type of opportunity to save £120. You need to think about where does that lie in the big issue.
And in terms of the promote and protect, that's a great point, because you've just mentioned so many things there in a short period of time. And how do you keep up to speed with everything? Was it yourself? Is it your team that do it? And then when you get all that information, how do you deliver that back into your member partners?
I've always been very good at what I call a hand grenade approach, which I walk into a room, pull the pin, drop the hand grenade, walk out.
Right.
So I'm very fortunate, basically leaving somebody else to pick up the mess. If the SMT company secretary, Moira, if she was here, she'd be thumping the table by now, because I'm very good at that with her. It is teamwork, and it is things that we all have this sort of database of knowledge that we don't write down, but we do communicate a lot. I speak to lots of people. I'm in dealerships constantly, and it might look as if I'm just wandering about having a cup of coffee and having a chat. The reality is that is actually what it is, but in that process, picking up information, picking up knowledge, sharing it. We communicate as an organisation. We have 3 direct communications. We have a weekly e-shot that we send out to all our members. We have a monthly e-bulletin that goes out with more detail. And what we try and do there is, the e-shot's maybe just the hot news of the week.
Yeah.
The e-bulletin is slightly more. There's maybe a couple of in detail commentaries in there, but there's also links to further detail. So the idea there is that the reader can look at it and think, well, I don't need anything about that. Oh, that's an interesting point. Click on this, and again, technology allows us to do this. Click on this, and you can get that in-depth interview.
So invite a click through if it's relevant, to the member that's picking it up.
Then we have our quarterly magazine, and that's just a sort of catch up with what's going on. It's purposely designed where it also highlights a couple of members every time, because again, I keep going back to it, we are owned by the membership, and I think I describe myself as a motor trader, and as a motor trader I'm fascinated by how other people run their businesses, because effectively, we're all in to make a return. Let's not be embarrassed about that. We're all in this sector to make a living. we used to have an awful lot of fun. We still do have a bit of fun, but we're there principally to get a return out of it. But we've all got such busy lives that we maybe forget some of the nuances that we had and some of the things that gave us that opportunity. So you get the chance to read the interview of a dealer in Lawrencekirk, and he maybe does something relevant to the sale of tyres that you did or forgot 10 years ago. But by reading the article, because he's a fellow motor trader, it's almost like there is an honour amongst thieves. Don't quote me on that one, but
yes.
It's that sort of, we're all in this together. We all have the same issues. Maybe have different approaches. So that's good. That allows us, again, just to keep refreshing. So we're just constantly refreshing what's going on, what's in the marketplace. Do we have it all? No. No single trade association does. But if we don't know it or we don't provide it, if the members, we encourage them to get back in touch with us. We have teams out there. There's field teams. There's 7 people out on the road constantly, and they'll bring some of the things back. It could be as random as maybe something relevant to the DVSA, or maybe taking a particular approach with something on MOT testing. We have 6 seminars a year where we actually invite the DVSA in and they speak to our members, and that's very popular. So again, that gives the member the opportunity to sit in the audience in a bit of anonymity, hear what the DVSA has got to say, and stick the hand up and ask a question. And the DVSA are superb at understanding that there's an interaction there, because guess what, they're actually getting value out of it as well.
Yeah.
Because it's when they go into any member of any size, there is a degree of panic and suspicion, and because here's the man from the ministry. It's the same as the VAT man.
That's
right.
But
in this situation, they've got a more relaxed environment. So ironically, we are providing them with something on a relaxed basis, and they feed back to us. So it's relationships like that. It's just a big melting pot, and all we try and do is just bring it together into 3 succinct ways of communicating: e-shot, e-bulletin, quarterly magazine, and it's all there purely to inform. And again, that falls into that encourage piece.
So speaking to Norman recently, he was telling me that the new website's going to be up and running soon. Is that something that we can now go on and have a look at?
Yes, it's actually, we had the test 2 weeks ago. I'm confident that we will have the front end of that new website launched. Well, I've actually put a target on it of the 27th of October, and that's because we have our annual dinner that day. Not that I'm going to bore people showing them how to use a website, but the point is that this is a big change for us, because again, our website traditionally has been a B2B website. It's there for the members, but we don't have a B2C function, effectively. That's what our members have.
Yeah.
But what we've done this time is we've put a motorist section in, and the idea of that is to encourage motorists to go onto the SMTA website and then put in the postcode or their postcode and get the options of the closest member dealers, and hopefully encourage that. And each member will have a wee sub-landing page, because we also have a lot of our members that may not actually have a website. In fact, more and more people are sort of using social media now as their mainstream.
Yeah.
So it is encouraging that aspect. We're also hoping that at that point we will launch the digital part of our Auto eSure programme, which has been longer than I had hoped in development, but that's because there's been a number of changes along the way. But effectively, that's a recognition programme for sites that become competent and, more importantly, properly skilled to maintain, service and repair electric vehicles, because that's the big danger position at the moment, that people approach these vehicles just thinking it's just another development. It's not. It's a game changer.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, it is, and I think more people are sort of sitting ready and waiting for the information to come out. You know, there's a lot of topics out there that do I or don't I at the moment, isn't there?
Yeah, and I guess that from the consumer point of view, the hang-ups are delivery. We all know the challenges that we've got with new vehicle delivery at this moment in time, but also it's access to repair. And I took that up with the Scottish Government as part of my role is almost like a quasi-lobbyist. So obviously I speak to the Scottish Government, the UK Government and the EU still to this day because we are members of SECRA. But the Scottish Government, I took the point up to them with them that we have to look at the skills availability for properly trained and skilled and certificated individuals to repair these vehicles, because if we don't, we're going to end up in a situation where we have almost like a postcode scenario for buying a vehicle. Because if you live rurally, as I do, then you wouldn't buy a vehicle that you couldn't get repaired within 100 miles. You wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Now, we've got 2030 on the horizon where the sale of internal combustion engines are going to be banned. Effectively, 8.4 years is the average vehicle length of ownership in the age of vehicle in this country. So by 2040, the vast majority of the vehicles will be electric or propelled powered electrically or hydrogen electric, whatever. We need to make sure that the skills are available across the whole country to be able to repair and maintain those. Or we've got a problem, and that had to be pushed with them. We joined forces with the IMI to promote that. The Scottish Government went out and did a survey, which we have, and it's available to anybody, that at that point, which was just on the cusp of COVID, the survey was only published this year because of COVID, but it turned out that at that point there was 5% of garages had the proper skills to be able to repair and maintain an electric vehicle. Now, I was in London earlier this week, and I can tell you that figure is now 13%. So
really?
It's moved quickly.
Okay. Yeah.
But what that means is 87% don't.
Yeah.
And you just put that consideration into mind. And the flip side of that is we also need to make sure our members understand that ignorance also will have a cost.
Yeah.
And the fundamental cost is that if they're allowing their technicians to work on electric vehicles, they are in breach of the Electricity at Work Act. Now, the ramifications of all of that on your employer's liability could be a high potential. So this is all the stuff that sits in below the headlines.
My goodness.
People need to sit and think, right, I'm either going to be in that arena or I'm not.
Yeah.
There's no middle ground here, and if you're going to be in it, you need to have properly trained staff, properly skilled with the proper equipment, using the proper processes, especially around the consumer entering the workshop. And that's only to meet the requirements of the Electricity at Work Act, which ensures you've undertaken your proper duty of care with regards to your employees. So
that's really interesting, Sandy, because we're looking at further down the line doing topics on EV, and it'd be great to get you back in, because I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that will be picking up on what you just said there with a great amount of concern. Front end thinking about it, but when you dig in deeper, there's a lot more to it.
I think, to be honest, Matt, that's why we exist. Because I go back to the day job is hectic for our members, and they really don't have the time. And to a degree, a number of them won't have the inclination to look at this because it's not relevant just now. The Act is, of course, but the market's not there at the moment. But that market's going to creep on us quickly, yeah. And because they're electric, it's also going to be quietly. So we're going to have that situation. We just need to make sure that we, as a trade association, offer our members the best advice to allow them to make the balanced decision, because there are costs associated with that.
Sure.
But go back to what I said maybe 10, 15 minutes ago. They'd also, to my mind, they should sit down and think, right, there's an opportunity here. But the opportunity will come at a cost. And it's got to come, the consumer's going to have to pay. They're going to have to recognise that the technician that's working on that vehicle, A, is a highly skilled technician, B, he's actually, there's a cost to making sure that he's best equipped to supply that with all the products and the process that sit in behind that. So we can't do this, we're back to this, we can't do the race to the bottom. No, it's got to be there.
And we'll come on to it in a wee bit, just in more detail about profit margins and costs of things per dealership now, and in a wee bit more detail. But just going back to yourself, 7 years as chief executive in the SMTA, we've had COVID and we've had a lot of things that you've had to adapt to. What would you say has been your biggest challenge in the last 7 years in that role, Sandy?
The biggest challenge never changes, and it's just making sure that what we provide is relevant and current to what the sector needs. And we've just, all of I've mentioned before, we've just got to keep touching all the sides, gathering as much information as possible, making sure it gets out there, because our members are business people. That's a unique factor. We don't have private individuals. They're all business people.
Yeah.
They want us. I used to say to people, I see us as a solutions provider. That's maybe a bit grandiose. We should be the sort of the map. We should provide, this is where you need to think about, here's the key points you should pass on the way there.
Yeah.
So, but we need to make sure that we keep that current and we keep it effective. And that is the challenge, even down to, as you rightly say, costs of running business. I mean, 12 months ago, you and I would never have sat down here and debated the fact about the cost of electricity.
That's right. Yeah. And we read anything in the press now, businesses closing every day now because of the cost of electricity. It's hitting every day hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's and it'll also, the interesting thing for me, maybe I've got a very simplistic mind, but I also wonder what that's going to do for the cost of ownership on electric vehicles. Because 12 months ago there was no consideration.
There was
no electric vehicles going to be so cheap compared to an ICE, but it's
now it's changed, isn't it? Yeah.
It has changed. The dynamics change, so the challenge changes, but so does the opportunities. But more importantly, so does the solutions. So.
Yeah, I had this conversation last night actually with a friend of mine who's got his own business. He's just changed his fleet into EV, and from the front end work that he spent months upon months doing, he's now debating whether he's done the right thing or not. But I guess all will be revealed, because that goes back to the lack of knowledge and where do people go to find out the information. So from the SMTA point of view, if you're doing all these resources, then I guess anybody listening in Scotland that's not a member of the SMTA, then they need to have a wee look at your website and get on and register.
Oh, well, that's the sales pitch I would say, yes, and thanks, you've saved me for doing it. But, but no, the point is that I care about this sector with a passion.
Yeah,
possibly more than I should, because it's almost unhealthy. It has been part of my life for so long, and I'm rather sad in that I'm actually interested in four wheels and cars. So that's really unfortunate. But I'm also the first person that if a non-member phoned up with a particular issue and they wanted a bit of advice, I've done it in the past and I'll do it again. I would give them that advice, if for no other reason than simply to get them to ask the question of themselves, should we be a member of that association? Because that's really what we want to do. We want to become stronger and stronger. I'm delighted to say we have grown quite dramatically over the 7 years, and that adds strength to the situation. It allows, for example, the Scottish Government to understand that they can get feedback from us and we can get it from our members. That's key to them. You ask any politician, they're only there because people put the tick in the box.
Yeah.
So they're hungry for that type of involvement, and we are proud to do that for a very dynamic, fast-moving sector, and that's not going to change.
No. So you just can't say no, can you?
Truth is, no, you're right. I was trying to work out how I could without using the word no. It's because the next guy's problem is actually a piece of education to me. I can pass on to the members who don't have that problem, because we all deal with the same thing. It's got four wheels. The chances are the problem will reoccur somewhere else, and there is nothing better from a trade association point of view as being able to say, oh, we've had that before, here's the solution. And there's categorically nothing better from a business owner point of view if you pick up the phone to somebody who says, yeah, I've heard of that before. Yeah. Here's what happened, because that's it's just that void in the middle we need to occupy.
Yeah. Used cars. It was always going to hit the topic. You mentioned your dealer forum, your partners, etc. How have they reacted to the challenges that they've had with used cars? Because everybody, certainly from vehicles and video point of view, when we're out there and we look at a lot of people with their stock, and stock turns obviously affected in a good way, I guess, but it's where do I get my next one from when I sell it? So what's the reaction been, and how have you helped from an SMTA point of view, Sandy?
Well, the thing about used cars is that, as you rightly say, that has changed, and It really does change quickly. We all know about the cycles of selling cabriolets and convertibles and selling 4x4s and when they're good and when they're bad. I mean, your auction experience, you'll know that.
Yeah.
The wholesale pricing this year had it just was unbelievable. Some of the results that we were watching, and I try to keep on top of that. I'll sit in on most of our members have live auction sites, and I'll sit in and watch them periodically. And you'll always see the exception, but you can get that profile. What we try and encourage our members where they need the encouragement, and I've got to say we have got a very significant number of members who don't. They're absolute all-stars at what they do, and there are a lot of very, very good professionals. I've always had the view that that's where the real talent lies, is in the ability to move used cars and understand the used car market. Having been a new car dealer, the manufacturer will tell you how many you can get. The manufacturer will send you more than that and then tell you what rewards you get for selling more than that. And we're all driven that way. That's changing now, admittedly, with the shortages we see. But it was always about the used car, to my mind. The used car was where the money would be made or lost. So there's lots of good intelligence there. But we do share comments that we get from our wholesale supporters. Say we have all of the auction groups are in membership of the SMTA in Scotland, and that's good. And we get lots of profile from them. There is no doubt about the fact there are shortages out there, and it's really down to the skills of the individual site. What they would pay for the stock. The big move we see at the moment is that the level 3 is softening, level 3 vehicle, and the level 4 vehicle is becoming quite a challenge. And that's mostly down to, I think in some respects, maybe unrealistic expectations from the seller. In other respects, it's down to the sheer amount of work that's currently out there for particularly body and paint shops to get these vehicles reconditioned, and that's changing. That's bringing about another change in the marketplace, where you will see people, I believe, over the next few months, possibly stepping back from ordering that next new vehicle on the PCP type deal to considering, you know what, I might just hold off. I might not replace predominantly PCH. I might not replace it. I might look in the marketplace for something that's a wee bit cheaper, still on a conditional sale, but they might also just accept that maybe it's got a few bruises and graces around the life.
It's a great point. I was reading today in an article that the customers will be looking for a shorter life cycle within their cars at the moment, just let steadies on. Then when it goes back to, if and when it goes back, which I'm sure it will, to normality, then they can get back onto that sort of more normal change cycle that we go for, back into PCPs, PCHs, etc.
Yeah, I think as well the consumers have, I think they've all realised that you can't walk into a dealership now and say, oh, I'll have one of those in blue, can you get it for me a week on Monday? You know, we're now basically looking at very long lead times for very standard type product. It used to be, it was the high profile prestige vehicles that would have 6 and 9 months lead times, but we're now seeing that on what we would call just a core product. So.
And I wonder to that comment that you made there, does that then encourage people to shop more online tentatively as opposed to walking into dealers?
I go back to something I said quite some time ago, that it is a people business, but I think the average customer now no longer rolls about on a Saturday afternoon kicking 15 cars or 6 sites looking for a vehicle. They do a lot of their preliminary research online, and why wouldn't they? Because the quality of what's available online, it leads into you guys with your role with video, but predominantly people will take those first sort of steps. And I think there's some statistics rolling about how many people actually do that whole process. There's interesting debates particularly among some of the large groups with regards to the whole online journey. There are some that have clearly went down that route, and they'll do, from looking to the vehicle to actually paying for the vehicle and getting the vehicle delivered. Some of them will do that and do it spectacularly well.
Yeah.
And there's others who say it's a very small part of our business. It still involves somebody coming in or collecting the vehicle. But we keep going back to it. No matter how technically advanced the whole online concept is, we still rely on the most important asset in our business, which is people.
Yeah.
And you can have all the technology in the world. Says this is me that could barely work the remote control, but genuinely you can have all of that technology, all of that knowledge, all of that education, but if you have got the wrong person at the end of the keyboard,
it's all about behaviours, isn't it?
It's all about behaviour. It's all about understanding. It's all about desire to satisfy.
Yeah.
And again, a good point, when we talk about digital and there's a lot of coaching going out there, and we do it very much so when we're in dealers groups and manufacturers and whatever, and it's all about personalising the digital aspect of it. So whilst they can't get into the dealership, it's that if I like you, I'll buy from you, but it's still having that ability to introduce yourself as a sales exec to the customer from a digital platform. And, selfishly going back to ourselves, that's a lot of coaching that we do with dealers and dealer groups alike, where, the customer's more likely, if they meet the person online, to take that inquiry into some form of appointment, whether it's test drive or some form of call to action from there.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more, quite frankly. I mean, I go back, Matt, to the days of when Ford first brought options into the UK.
Yeah.
Because I was part of, at that time, Ford's dealer development network, we were used as the pilot for the small dealer, albeit main dealer, we were used for the small dealer model of options, which at that point was really, this is the next big thing. And fair dues to Ford, they made a good job of it. But every single training session, and we were trained by the Americans, and I never forget this, and this is not a word of a lie. My trainer was from California, and his name, and I'm sure if he's still alive he won't mind me repeating this, but his name was just so Californian. It was Ralph Thunderbunk. That's not a name you're going to forget.
That wasn't his stage name, though.
No, but the point is that these guys, it was an organisation called Hafakar, and Hafakar, the way their training started was with, first and foremost, sell yourself. And that's that same ethos you've just mentioned.
Yeah.
Because the people will do the deal with the individual. They'll do it for a whole raft of different reasons, but they'll do it with the individual.
Yeah.
And that's
very, very, very true. And that's not changed,
No.
in terms of when digital was here, if it was showroom walk-ins. And you mentioned earlier about Saturdays, and Saturdays used to be the day where you'd have your shirt and tie all ready, and you'd be there at 8:30 waiting for the doors to open, and a flood of people come in, and those days have totally gone now, haven't they?
They have, and I mean we have several members who don't open at the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
They don't open at weekends because they've got a digital presence. So they're open 24/7. They haven't reduced their opening hours. They've just changed the way they do business.
Yeah.
So we've covered quite a lot, and it's been really knowledgeable, and I'd love to get you back in at some point again, Sandy, if you don't mind. But a couple of questions I want to sort of finish off with, and one of them is, what do you see as the single biggest challenge of our industry going forward in the future? Because we've covered off a lot here. There's been so many ups and downs and topics that we've looked at. Which would you see as our sort of single biggest challenge? Skills.
It's as simple as that. We need to have properly trained, properly rewarded people in this industry. We need to understand that we are no longer associated with the vehicle of 1903 that had cable brakes, and I don't even remember if that was the time when they had a man out walking with a red flag in front. We now have a vehicle that is potentially a weapon on the road 24/7, 365, and we're expected to be able to ensure that vehicle operates properly, despite the fact that at maybe 3 tons, there are only 4 points of contact with the main road, and that's the 4 tyres. So you go beyond that the 4 tyres, and there is a huge amount of technology that has to be properly functioning for that to work and to be safe. And that even goes on to the sales side as well, because clearly we need to make sure that we've got the right people who put the right onus onto them with regards to selling the vehicle, delivering the vehicle. You mentioned, Danny, that you're a product genius, making sure that people understand how that functions, and also like badgering to make sure they can prove that they understand how it functions, because again, all this technology, it's so leading edge. We talk about driverless vehicles. The situation, as far as I'm aware, is that the regulations that they're looking at will imply there's a certain point where the vehicle can be driverless, but there must be a driver. Somebody must occupy the driving seat ready to take over. So you might even think that maybe it's a training requirement going for it. It's just a minefield, but it's all going to come down to skills, and that at the moment is a bit of a lottery.
Okay, Sandy, I'm going to end it on that. You know, we've just sat for 30 odd minutes and it's been absolutely wonderful having you in our first podcast. So all I can do is say thanks very much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, absolutely delighted, and hopefully you'll get something you can use out of it.
We will, I'm sure we will. I'm sure our listeners will love it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.